This week we are going to talk about the films of Natalie Wood. I fear that Natalie Wood has been reduced to just an anecdote about the way she died, whether or not her husband, Robert Wagner, had anything to do with it, whether it was an accidental drowning or other things were involved, and what did Christopher Walken know. And I think she deserves better than just becoming a story about how she died. So today, the focus will be on the best films of Natalie Wood, in my opinion, to get some focus back on her actual film career. And again, if you don't know me, my name is Stacia. I am a lifelong film fan, and I've always studied film and film history. And so I like to share that with people. If you like stuff like that, please subscribe to the channel. So the first movie I'm going to suggest, and even though it's not Christmas, is the movie Miracle on 34th Street. She starred in this when she was a little kid. It was at the beginning of her film career, and much like Jodie Foster, started off as a child star. And then we're going to jump all the way to Rebel Without a Cause in 1955. It was a teen sensation, and the first time, really, I think movie studios thought we can market things directly to teenagers. And she plays the role of Judy. She was 16, 17 years old when she did this movie, so just a teenager herself. Of course, she starred in this with James Dean and Sal Mineo, and also Dennis Hopper is in Rebel Without a Cause. And Rebel Without a Cause was directed by Nicholas Ray, who off-screen a teenage Natalie Wood had an affair with. After that, they really didn't know what to do with her. They wanted to capitalize on her popularity of being in this film, so she ends up doing a lot of teeny bopper roles. Much like the career of Jodie Foster again, where she had this big breakout sensation and then they don't really know what to do with her. The only real highlight for Natalie Wood's career during this time is probably the 1956 movie The Searchers, where she plays the young Debbie in the movie. The Searchers, though, is not my favorite movie. I was never really a big John Wayne fan. And I know this is such a classic to some people, but I really don't like The Searchers. So the next movie I'm really going to suggest about her career is all the way we fast forward to 1961 to Splendor in the Grass, where she played with Warren Beatty in this movie, and she's still a teenager through a large amount of the movie, but this is really her first chance to shine like she did back in her Rebel Without a Cause days. She plays Deanie and Warren Beatty plays Bud, and this is about the struggles of young love and the mental health of the two young lovers. Elia Kazan was the director of this movie, and Warren Beatty and Natalie Wood, although for most of the film they are teenagers, they do grow up slightly in the movie. They were about 22, 23 during the making of this movie. This is the first time since, I would say, Rebel Without a Cause, she really got to show off her acting. But I think Splendor in the Grass, personally, is a really good portrait, especially of then. It takes place in the 20s and 30s, but it's a really good portrait for that time of mental health, what young love and everything can do to, especially a girl's mental health, and the mental health of the boy. He doesn't go, Warren Beatty's character does not go unscathed in this movie mentally as well. But like I said, this I think is a really good portrait, and Natalie Wood is fantastic in the movie. She captured such an innocence and such a wanting to grow up. But she always seemed caught between the old Hollywood studio system and the new breed of actor that was coming up during that time, even though she was the same age as the new breed. And I think that has a lot to do with her being a child actress starting in the late 40s. But this role is really good for her because it capitalizes on that sense of Natalie Wood being that in between a girl and a more mature woman. Then also in 1961, which was a good year for Natalie Wood, I'm going to suggest West Side Story. It is a classic. And yes, in a different world, this should have been all Hispanic actors. Natalie Wood does play Maria, and no, she is not Hispanic. She is of Russian descent. But again, this captures, like Splendor in the Grass, her kind of caught between girlhood and womanhood, that transition period. And I think those roles, especially at that time, were really made for Natalie Wood. And there was something about her that just helped capture that time that she is immortalized in. Of course, this is about the rival street gangs, the Jets and the Sharks, the young love of Tony and Maria, and what happens between that in the movie. Rita Moreno is also in this movie, and she is just fabulous in the movie. She deserves all the recognition she has for this movie. And I think we all know by this point, this is a retelling or reimagining of the Romeo and Juliet story. Then we're going to jump to 1963. It is the movie Gypsy. Kind of mixed reviews when this came out. People didn't see Natalie Wood in the part of the burlesque stripper who had the ultimate stage mother. But I would say it goes along with West Side Story and Splendor in the Grass, this contrast between being the little girl or, the young woman and trying to break into that more womanly life. I think Natalie Wood was made for these kind of roles. But the controversy was this was based on a huge stage play. Nobody thought Natalie Wood was right for the part. They were thinking more of a Judy Garland or Judy Holliday, something like that. Those were the director's first choices. But Natalie Wood was a big name during that time, and she is the one that got the role. Even though she didn't have the greatest of singing skills, her singing was always dubbed by somebody else in the movies that she sang in. Also controversial in the casting of this movie was Rosalind Russell as Mama, when Ethel Merman played her to what everybody thought was perfection in the stage play. But Natalie Wood was allowed to sing in this movie, unlike West Side Story, where she was dubbed by Marni Nixon. It is her real singing voice in Gypsy, and Margaret was also considered for the role of Gypsy Rose Lee in the movie. But like I said, Natalie Wood's star power in the early 60s was unmatched by any other in her age range. All in all, Gypsy didn't perform like anybody thought it would be at the time, but I think it is actually, if you go back and watch it, a wonderful movie starring Natalie Wood. She's singing her own voice for the first time. You really get to see her come into her womanhood. This is like her bridge picture into her more adult roles, and no pun intended, because she plays basically a stripper in this movie. So that brings us to her other 1963 role, Love with the Proper Stranger, where she plays alongside Steve McQueen. And this really cements her into an adult movie star. For the early 60s, the storyline of Love with the Proper Stranger is something that we nowadays really don't think of a movie coming out of that time. I think we more think of that as 70s and later. What I mean by that is she basically plays a store clerk who has a one-night stand with a musician played by Steve McQueen, and she finds herself pregnant, and the resulting decision whether or not to keep that baby. This is really the first time you fully see Natalie Wood in a picture in an adult role, and you really get to see the subtlety of her acting. This is where she's really acting with her peers also. She is with Steve McQueen. It is her and him for a large amount of the movie. He is her contemporary in many ways. He is a part of the new wave of acting, and I know she was with Warren Beatty in Splendor in the Grass, but Splendor in the Grass really harkens back to an older style of movie making where this is really the newer style that's coming to the forefront with the movies starring the younger audience. And this is the first time she's really a part of that type of movie making. In 1964, she kind of steps back into the foray of classic Hollywood movie making, of making Sex and the Single Girl, but it furthers her more down the line into her fully adult roles. She stars as Helen Brown. It is based on Helen Gurley Brown's book of the same name. She stars in it with Tony Curtis and Lauren Bacall. And like I said, it really harkens back to a little bit classic Hollywood movie making style, which, like I said before, Natalie Wood is really the bridge between older Hollywood and younger Hollywood at this moment in time. And also in 1965, she plays in The Great Race. She is Maggie Dubois, and this is yet another movie that she does that really goes back to the older Hollywood style of filmmaking. It's a decent movie. It's not my favorite of hers, but I thought I'd include it in here because it is kind of a retrospective of her career and shows the back and forth between the type of movies that Natalie Wood was making as opposed to a lot of what her contemporaries were making at the time. And Love with the Proper Stranger is, at this point, her only foray into making the new Hollywood type of movies. And The Great Race is one of those movies where it was the all-star cast, a cavalcade of characters, and she is one of the main characters in it. But they really do play off Natalie Wood's sexiness in this movie. You get to see her kind of, show off the goods in the movie, much like she did in Gypsy. She is used as the sex symbol in this movie, and it is all played for laughs, but it's not one of my favorite ones of her movies. In 1965, she also plays in Inside Daisy Clover, which is kind of a bridge movie for her again, where she is caught between old Hollywood and new Hollywood. Some themes in this movie parallel her own life of being a child star and everybody thinking of her as always a child, trying to be a grown-up now, and the struggles that she had with her family in this movie. And also, this is the first time she pairs up with a young, unknown Robert Redford, and they remained friends throughout her life. She was really a champion of the early Robert Redford career. Inside Daisy Clover has always suffered from mixed reviews as well. Some people love it, a lot of people hate it, but I really actually do like Inside Daisy Clover, mainly for watching her and Robert Redford together. They have quite a chemistry together, I think. You can really see I wouldn't say romantic relationship with them, because I don't think they ever had a romantic relationship. I just think you really see that friendship side between them where you have chemistry between friends. And I think that's what her and Robert Redford really carried together. But the movie I'm really gonna suggest that gets mixed reviews is This Property is Condemned, which this time she is with Robert Redford, but he is in a starring role with her instead of a supporting role with her, and is more of a romantic relationship. It's the first movie where I actually saw Robert Redford shine in the movie. I like Natalie Wood in this. It's more of a new Hollywood movie, not quite as much as Love with a Proper Stranger, but it is also a Sidney Pollack film. It was written by Francis Ford Coppola on a Tennessee Williams play. It has a lot of elements in there, and I really think, it was a great movie, and I don't think it gets the recognition it deserves, and I think it deserves a watch. This was supposed to be a big film for Natalie Wood as well, and it didn't perform as expected. In fact, Tennessee Williams, which is based on one of her shorter plays, didn't like this movie at all, even though I'm recommending that you watch it. I have always really liked This Property is Condemned. I don't know why, but you watch it. You tell me what you think, or if you've seen this movie, tell me what you think of This Property is Condemned. Am I delusional in thinking this movie is better than it gets credit for? Then, besides the movie Penelope, Natalie Wood takes a break from her film career for a few years and comes back in 1969 with the movie Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, which is basically a swingers movie. So that is a very different step in her film career. And she, although she is just in her early 30s at the time, is playing what is portrayed as like an older middle-aged character. Even though I don't think the character is supposed to be middle-aged, I think they're supposed to be in their early 30s. They just come off as couples that have been married for a long time. I don't know what it is with people at that time where you would be in your like early 30s, relatively young, because it stars Robert Culp and Elliot Gould and Diane Cannon and Natalie Wood. They all come off a lot older than they are, even though they're all around the same age. But especially Elliot Gould and Robert Culp seem a lot older than Diane Cannon and Natalie Wood. But it's so funny for her to go from the early 60s, where she was bridging between playing like a teenager and a young adult, to the late 60s where, oh, she might as well just give up on life and be this middle-aged housewife who's bored. But the movie is really a sex farce movie. It was revolutionary for the time. Movies, especially Hollywood movies of this ilk, weren't really made with this explicit of a sexual theme. It was written and directed by Paul Mazursky. Natalie Wood and Diane Carroll look fabulous in this movie as well. But like I said, this was her first movie in 3 years. And I think she took a break to, one, become a mother, because that was one of her lifelong things that she wanted to do. And two, because she had a string, even though I suggest some of these movies to her, but Inside Daisy Clover, the movie Penelope, and This Property is Condemned that she did in 65, 66, her career around there, movies that were supposed to be big hits for her, really didn't pan out that well. And then because of her desire to become a mother, she takes another break in her career and doesn't make another movie until 1973. Although she does appear as herself in Robert Redford's movie The Candidate in 1970. But that time, Natalie Wood has one marriage breakup, and then she gets back with Robert Wagner, who she was married to when she was 18 until she met Warren Beatty and she left him. But they go on to star in a movie together in 1973 called The Affair, which is a TV movie. And she does a lot of TV movies during the 70s. I don't really know the reasoning behind this, but it seems that her breaks in her career in the 60s, plus the middling success she had during the 1960s, from the highest of highs to just kind of just being in the middle where things just don't work out. Her career in the 70s is not what you would expect for a star of her caliber. The last movie of any note that I'll actually mention, because her career in the 70s into the early 80s before she died was really just there. A lot of guest starring roles that you would think that, the older actors from the 40s and the 30s would be taking at that time. So the last movie I'll mention is actually her final film, Brainstorm. She passed away while making this. She made it with Christopher Walken, who is only 5 years younger than Natalie Wood, although most of us probably think of her as quite older than Christopher Walken because he's so steeped in the 70s and beyond mind frame of the movie industry. Brainstorm had to be heavily reworked because, like I said, she did pass away during the making of this movie, and her death is, and we all know, under mysterious circumstances. She drowned to death. She was only in her early 40s when she died. And I think it's because of the mysterious circumstances of her death and what legendary status she has in her mind, and partly the legendary status of all of the leads of Rebel Without a Cause dying under tragic circumstances, that I think nowadays most people remember her more for her death than her career in movies or her life. I know that her daughter, Natasha Gregson Wagner, has made great strides in trying to get people to remember her mother for who she was instead of how she died. And I think Natalie Wood deserves this. So do me a favor, if you haven't seen a Natalie Wood film in a long time, watch some of these movies. You won't regret it. She was quite a striking movie star and should still be. If it hadn't been for tragic circumstances of how she died, she would still be here with us today. I thoroughly believe that she would still be here today, much like a lot of her contemporaries are. And that in the 80s, she was kind of stepping back into the film life. And I believe that she had more promising films ahead of her. And I just think it's sad that most people think of her as a relationship to her death and mysterious circumstances surrounding it, as opposed to the wonderful career that she had, and by all accounts, the wonderful person that she was. But I'm sorry, I don't get into that here. I just talk about people's film careers, but I believe hers is a film career that deserves to be more remembered than it is. Again, my name is Stacia, and I hope you liked this video. I want to thank all of my subscribers. I'm to a grand 115 subscribers now, and I appreciate each and every one of you. I'm trying to build a small community here of people that like talking about movies, movie history, classic movies. But again, my name is Stacia, and what can I say? I really like movies, and if you do too, please subscribe to my channel. But I love you all. See you next time. Bye.